We need to be more 80-20. The team is not working 80-20 enough. You need to approach this analysis with the 80-20 mentality. So the 80-20 principle or the 80-20 rule or the Pareto principle, as some people are calling it, this is the topic for today's video. This principle or rule is so commonplace in consulting and in many other industries as well that this term is almost a cliche. So as important as it is, I want you to really understand what it's all about, why it's used so frequently in consulting, and what indeed the value of it all is. So let me start here by explaining what this is all about. And indeed, this Pareto principle, how it was originally called, was invented by Vilfredo Pareto. He was an Italian economist, and he apparently found out that in Italy at that time, 80% of the land was owned by 20% of the people. So 80-20, this relationship, this is what it's all about. And this now permeates in lots of other areas of society, of work, and indeed the common implication here for work is that often for many tasks, 80% of the results are created by 20% of the activities. 80-20. So this is the topic that we are going to talk about today. So welcome to Firm Learning. My name is Heinrich, and on my channel Firm Learning, I want to help you to become successful in the first years of your career. I'm a former McKinsey management consultant, and on my channel I try to share my tips both for soft skills and hard skills that you need to be successful. So if you want to hear more about that, feel free to subscribe to the channel to stay up to date on all my content. So indeed, today's topic is the Pareto principle. I will look at it for two directions. The first is actually the application of it in analysis that you do, in practical work, in your work as a consultant. So how can you leverage this principle to use it for work that you do together with the client? But then second, I'm also going to talk about how it's often used internally. So let's dig into it to better understand how the Pareto principle really works. And what you see here is the typical curve of how such a Pareto relationship really looks like. And indeed, the characteristic of this curve is that in the beginning, the curve has a very high slope that then reduces over time, goes down over time unless it's almost zero in the very end. But what do you actually see here? So on the x-axis, you see the different elements, the different items, components that then create a certain effect. And these components are ordered by their size or magnitude or impact, right? So the first components are the strongest, biggest, best ones. And then the magnitude goes down. And then on the y-axis, you see the effect, the output, the outcome of these inputs. And indeed, what you can see here is that the very first components create a significant portion of the outcome, and then every additional component, every additional item that comes after it, its marginal contribution to the total result is significantly diminishing, and in the end it's almost zero. So this was maybe a bit theoretical, so let's make it practical. Where is this really applied to practice? Where does this really exist? And now a couple of examples from Wikipedia, for instance, in the wealth distribution. So for many countries, the 80-20 rule more or less is indicative of the wealth distribution of the population. So the wealthiest 20% of the people own 80% of the total wealth of the company. Or another application, the healthcare system. So typically 20% of the patients create 80% of the cost of the healthcare system. In business, it might be in sales, 20% of the products creating 80% of the revenue. Or in production, 20% of the parts creating 80% of the problem, of the defaults. Or in buying, 20% of all your suppliers are responsible for 80% of your cost baseline. So these were just some examples that I found on Wikipedia and other places in the internet. Of course, this is never precisely exactly the case. It just gives a rough indication, but at least personally, I find it really fascinating to see that this is a relationship that you really see often when you observe things in the business world or in other areas of your daily life. So how can you apply this 80-20 principle in your work as a consultant, also as an employee working in a certain business function, if you just want to understand your business a bit better? Because indeed, this Pareto analysis is an analysis that you can do in many many different types of circumstances, it's usually possible to complete it with very basic data, and it at least provides one angle, one perspective at the structure of the business, how certain things are working together and are interlinked. So let me just share you one example. I was working in a sales project and we were asking ourselves, how can we serve our customers in a more cost-effective way? So one of the first things that we did is that we looked at the customer base and we calculated the contribution margin for each individual customer. So we were asking ourselves, how much does the company earn with each of these individual customers? And then we ordered the customers from the highest to the lowest contribution margin, and then we created the cumulative curve, and of course, no big surprise, it was a Pareto relationship, meaning that roughly the 20% of the most profitable customers contributed to 80% of the profits, and then actually in the end, the curve even went down because there were a couple of customers which had a negative contribution margin. So if you took the product margin that was earned by selling certain products to them and you subtracted what the sales organization was costing you, so the cost to actually serve these customers, then some of them were negative. And this was a great discussion starter with the head of sales talking about how can we further prioritize these largest, most important customers, what ways can we think of to reduce the cost of sales for the long term, for the end of this whole curve, where at the moment we're actually even losing money. Also did a couple of purchasing projects, and here this is one of the first standard analysis as well. So looking at the supplier base and you're asking yourself, how is the spend of the company distributed among the suppliers? And again, often you also see this strong concentration of a spend with a couple of suppliers and then this big long tail. And here often again the question is, how can we optimize this? Can we consolidate some of the spend of the suppliers in the long tail with larger suppliers to simplify the organization and potentially also get volume discounts? Next example, a project where we looked into the product portfolio of a company. Again, same thing, Pareto analysis. You notice that a small share of the products create the vast majority of the revenue, and the question then is, what can we do with the long tail? Now, of course, to not be misunderstood here, this Pareto analysis is a very basic tool. It's very quick and easy to do it in the very beginning. This will, of course, not be the major insight of such a project. This will not be the end of it all, but it's often a good, effective first starting point to get for yourself also a good understanding of how this business is structured, and potentially you can also spark some first discussions with your client counterparts or colleagues about certain topics that you further want to look into your project. But before we jump into it, I want to introduce you to the sponsor of today's video, and this sponsor is Skillshare. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people. You can explore new skills, deepen your passions, and get lost in creativity. There are classes on marketing, personal branding, presentation skills, and many more. All of these are topics that are highly applicable to a career in consulting, banking, or corporate. And the best thing is that I made a slide writing class for Skillshare, so you can access and enjoy it as a Skillshare member. Personally, I recently took the class Productivity Masterclass, Principles and Tools to Boost Your Productivity, from the fellow YouTuber Ali Abdaal. It's a great class. It taught me many new aspects of productivity, and I very much enjoyed how he applied the Pareto principle or the 80-20 rule to productivity. Classes on Skillshare are specifically curated for learning. There are no ads. They're always launching new premium classes, so you can stay focused and follow wherever your creativity takes you. And the best thing is that it's less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. Skillshare created a special offer for subscribers of this channel from learning, and so the first 1,000 subscribers of me that click on the Skillshare link in the video description, we get a free trial of the Skillshare Premium membership. I hope this helps you to explore your creativity. Check it out, link in the video description. So now let's look at the other way, how the 80-20 rule is often used in consulting and similar industries. And this is for the internal organization of work, for the prioritization of the team, also the time management if you like. And here the basic idea is that, as with all the other things, often 20% of the effort of the work of a team leads to 80% of the outcome. And this, of course, the other way around means that the last 20% of output, the last 20% of polishing something takes 80% of the whole time. So the basic question is this really necessary? Is this really required? And of course here the meme behavior of a consulting partner is to walk into the team room and say something like, hey, let's be 80-20. But then he or she proposes a super detailed analysis which will take the whole team weeks and months really to complete, with no understanding at all what is really absolutely required and what is just a nice add-on, right? So often it's also a little bit of a joke, let's be 80-20, because unfortunately, or for whatever reason, many things, many analysis that consultants do are not 80-20, but there's often the big push to be extremely diligent, to be extremely detailed, and of course there might be good reasons for that, but still the whole idea is important and does afterward also play a big role in consulting. And it happens all the time that, for instance, as a new team joining a new client for a new project, there might be a business with different business units, 5 business units for instance, but then you might decide to only look into the biggest 2 or 3 business units, and actually you might have lots of ideas, lots of improvement potential for business unit 4 and 5, but these business units are so small, even if you improve their profit by 20%, it's just such a little part of the overall profit baseline for the company that the impact would just not be good enough, and you would be much better off if you really would focus on the larger 3 business units. And of course, considerations like that break down up to the activities of really the most junior people in the team room. So you might be a business analyst working on an analysis, and you get some data from the client and you do an analysis, but then you realize that certain pieces are missing. The client did not provide the full data of certain products, certain business units, whatever, certain data points are still not there. And here, of course, the natural inclination is that yes, you need this. You might need to spend another week to talk to another person who can provide you with this data as well. With many similar tasks, it's very easy to invest a lot of time into really getting something from 90% to 100%. And here it's just so important to always have the bigger picture in mind. Is this really helping you to answer the questions that you want to answer, or aren't 80% or 90% of the information not good enough to actually get exactly these answers? Is this additional 10 to 20% of result really required? Does this even help you at all? So if you'd like to simplify it, in the end, being 80-20 means to be pragmatic, to not overcomplicate things, to realize and understand when what you have is just good enough for what you need. Or to use another meme consulting phrase, the opposite of being 80-20 is to boil the ocean, right? To get really everything done, to put as much energy into something that you will be able to really boil the ocean. So ladies and gents, let's not boil the ocean please, but let's be a bit more 80-20 here. So I hope you found this interesting and insightful. Now I'd love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments, what are your experiences with the 80-20 principle? What is your favorite application of that principle? I'd love to hear that. So as always, if you liked the video, if you took any value out of it at all, please hit the like button for the YouTube algorithm, and also subscribe to my channel to stay up to date on all my content. I'm releasing new videos every single Saturday. In addition to that, feel free to follow me on Instagram. My handle is Firm Learning. I've also an email list sign up in the video description. And I want to end by saying thanks to all the members of Firm Learning. You're really making a big contribution to the channel. And of course, I also want to say thank you to Skillshare, the sponsor of this video. So if you want to benefit from this free Skillshare trial, check out the link in the video description. So see you next week. Very much looking forward to next video, to talking to you again next Saturday. So until then, bye bye. My name is Heinrich. This is Firm Learning. Cheers.